Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mari-chan and welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing with another reading of The Imperial Uncle by Feng Gua Guo, and we are covering chapter 2 today, so I hope you all enjoy. In the dusky light of the setting sun, I left by the eastern gate of the Imperial Gardens. I hadn't gone 2 steps when I heard someone repeatedly calling, "Imperial Uncle! Imperial Uncle!" I stopped, looked back, and saw one of my imperial nephews, Chee-tahn, Prince Dai, hurrying toward me. He came up to me and stopped in his tracks. Smiling, he said, "Imperial Uncle, I'm so glad to see you at the palace. There's an extremely urgent matter I need your help with." Ordinarily, I would have given Qizhe a hard time and made him call me Imperial Uncle some more before asking what he wanted. But I was in no mood for that today. So I said bluntly, "What do you need money for now?" Qizhe grinned and rubbed his hands together. "You've always been so good to me, Imperial Uncle. I didn't even have to say anything for you to know what I wanted." He came closer to me and flashed a number with his fingers. 6,000 liang. I sighed. "Qizhe, why don't you just pick up a torch, burn down my manor, and be done with it?" Lately, Prince Dai had become obsessed with antiques and artworks. He had collected countless items and lost a fortune in the process. Yet in fact, he was only an amateur when it came to antiques. Only an amateur would have the zeal and courage to dare to spend on such a scale. He had used up most of his own spending money, so he came to me, unabashedly borrowing again and again because I had doted on him since he was a child. Each time he asked for more, and of course, I had no hope that he would ever pay me back. Rubbing his hands together, Prince Dai said, "Imperial Uncle, it really is just 6,000 liang. Just these 6,000. Do you know what I ran across today, Imperial Uncle? A wine cup used by King Wen of Zhou. The seller is only asking for 8,000 liang of silver, and there are a lot of people fighting me for it. If I'm too late, it might get snatched up by someone else. I recall that just a few days ago you got hold of an earpick used by King Zhou of Shang, which seems to have been a fake. As I see it, you have no luck with the Shang and Zhou dynasties. Just let it go." Footnote number 4. The Shang and Zhou were early Chinese royal dynasties. King Zhou of Shang was the last king of the Shang dynasty, while King Wen of Zhou, in life the Count of Zhou, was posthumously honored as the Zhou dynasty's founder. I turned and kept walking. Qizhe came after me, dogging my steps. "Imperial Uncle, my good Imperial Uncle. Uncle Jun, this time it's different. Don't you think I've learned my lesson the first time? This time it's absolutely positively genuine. Besides, it's going to be my Imperial brother's birthday in a few days. I want to present the wine cup to him as a birthday gift. Think of it as helping grant my wish. When I offer it, how about I explain on the gift list that this wine cup is a joint present from me and you? You'll have a share in it too, Imperial Uncle. Won't that do?" Ridiculous. If I put up 6,000 liang of silver for something that cost 8,000, when you're writing out the gift list, reasonably speaking, your name ought to be written far behind mine. "If you can mend this bad habit of yours," I said earnestly to Qizhe, "and cease picking up all these antiques and artworks, His Majesty will no doubt be immeasurably gratified. In fact, His Majesty would be happier than he would be to receive 10 great cauldrons once used by King Wen of Zhou to worship the heavens." But Qitan refused to see sense. He ignored what I'd said and caught hold of my sleeve. "My dear Imperial Uncle, I'm begging you. What about 5,000 liang? Can you give me 5,000? I sighed. "I'll turn around right now and present a memorial to His Majesty asking him to make Henan your fiefdom. I've heard that there are many tombs of the Shang-Zhou period there. I'll get you a couple dozen able-bodied men, a cart full of pickaxes and shovels, and you can dig there every day. You're sure to uncover some treasures. You'll be better off than you are now." Qizhe was busy keeping a tight hold of my sleeve. Grinning broadly, he said, "Little Imperial Uncle, 4,000 liang. What about 4,000 liang?" Made a cuckold in the morning, then taken for a cash cow in the afternoon. I was very dispirited by my situation. As if he had smeared his mouth with honey, Chee-tahn said, I know you'll lend it to me, Imperial Uncle Jun. You've always loved me the most, ever since I was little. I continued to sigh. I really was helpless here. Chee-tahn's daring did have something to do with the way I had spoiled him all his life. When the various princes and princess son of that set, Chee-tahn, Chee-fei, Qili, and so on, Qizhe included, had been little, I had played with all of them. Among them, the late emperor's son, Qi-tahn and Qi-fei, and the princess' sons, Qili, Qi-jung, Qi-qian, and others, had particularly loved coming to Huai Manor. Qi-tahn was clever, bold, and sweet-tongued. At that age, the only difference between Qi-tahn and the emperor was their mothers, but they didn't seem like brothers at all. As a child, Qizhe had been taciturn, keeping everything bottled up. He never revealed when he wanted something, or even when he didn't. When Qi-tahn had any opinion whatsoever, he was sure to shout it as loudly as possible. Anything he wanted, he had to have. Due to this power of his, he had carried off quite a lot of items from Huai Manor. It was also because of this that it appeared as if I had always doted on Qi-tahn. Reportedly, the Empress Dowager had once been worried that I would shift my support to Qi-tahn, posing a threat to Qizhe's throne. When I later learned of this, I thought it was a little ridiculous. Never mind that I don't have the power to depose or appoint an heir. Merely considering Qi-tahn's temperament, it was for the best that he never became emperor. If he were the one on the throne now, our national treasury might well have been emptied, and the empire wouldn't be far from ruin. Qi-tahn was still clutching my sleeve and looking at me with a bright smile. If I didn't give him the money, I probably had no hope of him letting go of my sleeve any time today. Helpless, I prepared to nod. When I thought of striking off another large sum in my ledger, I felt a faint stabbing pain in my heart. Just then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a dark blue figure appearing around the corner. Out of nowhere, my heart fluttered. Perhaps heaven was taking mercy on me, handing me an opportunity like this. I pretended I hadn't seen. To Qi-tahn, I said, Fine, but I really can't stop worrying about whether that wine cup is real or fake. If it's a fake and I give you the silver, wouldn't I be overindulging you? I think I'd better go with you. There will be time to talk things over once it's been appraised and confirmed to be genuine. Little Imperial Uncle, said Qi-tahn, I don't think you know any more about antiques than I do. I figure that if something looks real to me, it's sure to look real to you too. And why should you go to the trouble of coming with me? I shook my head. No. I won't rest easy until it's been appraised. I had spoken slowly, drawing out my words. That dark blue figure was now approaching. I raised my head. Pretending I had just noticed him, I said, What a coincidence. We were just talking about our inability to appraise antiques, and along comes an expert. Smiling, Liu Tongyi bowed to me and Qi-tahn and said, I seem to have disturbed a conversation between your highnesses. Qi-tahn finally let go of my sleeve and nodded in return. Are you on your way home, Chancellor Liu? Precisely, Liu Tongyi said politely, then made to take his leave of us. I gathered up my courage and said, Chancellor Liu, please stay. Liu Tongyi stopped. A shade of doubt appeared in his expression. Qi-tahn looked at me in astonishment. I had very few dealings with Liu Tongyi at court. At most, we exchanged a bit of small talk when we met. Everyone knew there was neither friendship nor enmity between us. But I was a treacherous prince, while he was a sagacious chancellor, one black and one white. To outsiders, it was a matter of course that we would be at odds. So when I asked Liu Tongyi to stay, not only was his expression doubtful, even my imperial nephew Prince Dai was astonished. Trying to act natural, I said, I would like to trouble Chancellor Liu for some assistance. Qi-tahn stared at me in open shock. I smiled and said to him, Chancellor Liu is among the top talents at court. He is known to be a master of antiques appraisal. It seems the heavens have sent us an expert. Qi-tahn appeared conflicted. Imperial uncle, what are you... I saluted Liu Tongyi. Chancellor Liu, my imperial nephew, Prince Dai, wants to spend a large sum to purchase a wine cup that he claims was used by King Wen of Zhou. I worry that he may be chasing a fake. If you are currently at leisure, may we invite you to come with us to have a look? That way, we won't end up out some thousands of liang of silver to buy a fake antique and give others cause to laugh their heads off. I looked at Liu Tongyi. I could count on my fingers how many opportunities I'd found during the years we had been at court together to exchange a direct look with him like this. So in the spring breeze, my heart was quite full. Liu Tongyi was always cautious and self-disciplined. He wouldn't want to be tainted by my foulness. Most likely, he would find some excuse to shirk the invitation and leave. In the light of sunset, his face was as simple and elegant as an ink-wash painting, and my heart seemed inclined to imitate his air. The princess, the scandal, the cuckoldry, all retreated from me for the moment, disappearing beyond the clouds. He smiled faintly and said to me, "Naturally, I would not refuse the honor of your Highness Prince Huai's invitation. I am at your Highness's service." In that moment, flowers bloomed in the spring breeze. My heart overflowed. Liu Tongyi was dressed in his official robe and had to go home to change. Qizhe and I had both come to court in our ordinary clothes. At the palace gate, I said to Qizhe, "If you're in a hurry and worried that someone will get there ahead of you, you can go ahead and find a spot. I will accompany Chancellor Liu while he goes home to change. Don't buy it before Chancellor Liu and I get there." Qizhe's face filled with gratitude. "All right, Imperial uncle." "Then, I'll take my leave of you. Remember to bring the silver banknotes." He leapt up onto his horse and galloped away like the wind. I smiled at Liu Tongyi. My imperial nephew is too impatient. He rushes into everything recklessly. Didn't you tell him to go? His Highness Prince Dai is swift and decisive, said Liu Tongyi. When he reaches your Highness's age, most likely he will also be as cautious in thought and deed as your Highness. Was this praise or disparagement? Rense must have been under some misunderstanding concerning me, but even if his comment was meant as an insult, I was still pleased to hear it come out of his mouth. I smiled at him again. Chancellor Liu, you were too kind. Though I have admittedly reached a certain age, I still fall short here and there, so these imperial nephews probably all see me as a peer. I can never keep up the dignity required of an imperial uncle in front of them. There was a ways yet to go from the palace gate to Liu Tongyi's sedan. I deliberately slowed my speech and paced both. Fortunately, Liu Tongyi had no reserve in speaking to me. To my remark, he answered, Your Highness Prince Huai isn't much older than His Highness Prince Dai and the rest. In their eyes, Your Highness is probably different from His Highness Prince Shou and the other princes. Of my older cousins, like Prince Shou and Prince Yang, the eldest was over 50. If my father was still living, he would be about the same age. I really didn't seem to belong to the same generation as them. So I said, These words have made me feel as fresh as a youth, Chancellor Liu. Liu Tongyi smiled. Your Highness is too kind. I followed Liu Tongyi's sedan in my carriage and arrived at his residence along with him. Before taking his seat in the sedan, he had asked me, Isn't Your Highness going home to pick up silver banknotes? I don't believe Qitan's wine cup was really used by King Wen of Zhou, I said. It's almost certainly a fake. We'll go have a look, Chancellor Liu. There will be a chance to come back to it if your appraisal proves to be genuine. Liu Tongyi nodded. Yes, presumably a seller of antiques won't be worried that your highnesses might take his wine cup without paying. Of course, I said, especially since we have Chancellor Liu himself as a guarantor. Liu Tongyi's eyebrows rose slightly. So that is why your highness insisted on taking me along? Oh no, I said with a sigh. You've seen through me, Chancellor Liu. Liu Tongyi smiled slightly and bent to enter his sedan. I smiled as well and got into my carriage. My vehicle stopped at Liu Tongyi's residence, causing a considerable commotion inside. As I disembarked, I saw with my own eyes the faces of a steward and 3 or 4 pages change color. However, I soon found that Chancellor Liu ran his household ably. Those who snuck glances at me only dared to do so from discreet corners. While I received inquisitive looks from the maids and pages who came to serve tea as I sat in the main hall, their expressions were still respectful. Liu Tongyi was unmarried, but his house was still very tastefully furnished, and not a bit worse than my house, which had the benefit of a wife. As my thoughts turned to wives, I remembered the princess, and my head began to ache faintly again. Fortunately, at that moment, Liu Tongyi arrived, having changed into casual clothes. He wore a jade green silk robe and, having omitted a crown, had tied his hair with a ribbon of the same color. This made him look less stiff and more graceful. I could once again forget the princess for a time. He stood in the hall and said to me, "Your Highness, shall we go now?" I cheered up. "Yes, let's go." Qi-tan's wine cup cellar was aboard a large pleasure boat on the river in the capital's suburbs. When Liu Tongyi and I arrived, the twilight was profound. The lanterns on the pleasure boat had been lit. Chee-tahn was seated in the reception hall in the pleasure boat's hold, holding a wine cup as he watched girls in the costume of the Western region's dance. Apart from him, several others occupied the reception hall, some quite familiar to me and mostly sons of the capital's aristocracy. Chee-tahn, with a slightly mysterious air, as if he were here in disguise, stood up and ran over. Tugging on my sleeve, he said quietly, "You're finally here, Imperial Uncle. Oh, and Chancellor Liu is here too. Imperial Uncle, no one here knows who I am. You mustn't reveal our identities." I made a sound of agreement, thinking to myself, "You're always parading around the capital. How many people are there who wouldn't recognize your face? They're probably just pretending they don't know you." Qi-tan led Liu Tongyi and me to our seats. Sure enough, while the others present appeared unmoved, their gazes constantly wandered our way. Prince Huai, Chancellor Liu, and Prince Dai, all 3 together on a pleasure boat. Beyond a doubt, the whole court would know of this marvel tomorrow. "Where is the wine cup you want to buy?" I asked Qi-tan. "I suppose it can't be the one you're holding now." How could it be this one?" Qi-tan said, smiling. "I was waiting for you Uncle, and young Master Tong, before I asked Master Xu to bring it out." Then he said to a person sitting beside him, "Master Xu, the people I was waiting for are here. You can bring it out." This Master Xu was in his 40s or 50s, with a mauve face, a little pudgy, and dressed in shabby clothes. He had an unexpectedly modest look. After making a sound of agreement, he bowed in our direction, then turned and went through a side door. Shortly, he came out carrying a wooden box. Master Xu placed this box on the tea table in front of us, then slowly and carefully lifted the lid. Inside was another little box. When he opened that, there was another, and then still another. Only when the 5th box was opened did it reveal a bundle of deep red satin. This thing had been packaged with plenty of pomp. Master Xu lifted the parcel wrapped in red satin and held it in front of Qi-tan as if it were a fragile egg yolk. My nephew rubbed his hands together and accepted the parcel. Layer by layer, he unwrapped it. Nestled amid the red satin was a wine cup covered in verdigris that testified to its age. Judging from the patination, this cup might actually have been used by King Wen of Zhou. As if afraid that his fingerprints would dirty it, Qi-tan lifted it through the cloth and turned it this way and that to look at it. Then I took it from him and looked at it as well. Next to me, Qi-tan pointed out, "Uncle, look at the exterior of this wine cup. Look at the designs. There's no doubt that it's a relic of the Shangzhou period. And get a look at the verdigris. A thick patina like this must have taken 1,000 years to build up." His eyes sparkled. He seemed to want to reach straight through my robe to get right to my silver banknotes. I silently offered the wine cup to Liu Tongyi, who took it, looked, then said, "Master Xu, as I see it, this wine cup does not appear to be a relic of the Shangzhou period." I had been expecting this. I smiled. Master Xu looked shocked. Sir, please mind what you say. I have always been an honest businessman. How could I dare to deceive my valued customers with a fake?" Chee-tahn looked even more shocked. Young Master Tong, look closely. It's clear at a glance that this is an antique with a long history behind it. If it doesn't come from the Shangzhou period, then what year does it come from?" Liu Tongyi put the wine cup on the table and said lightly, "As I see it, it's from last year." When night was at its deepest, I returned to my manor by starlight. Qizhe was despondent. The wine cup had been determined by Liu Tongyi to be a fake, and a very clumsy one at that. Liu Tongyi said that making a fake like this was very easy. Cast a mold base on the antique to be copied, prepare a pot of liquid copper, and pour as many as you like. Then you toss it in grease and let it soak. Bury it in sludge for several days and expose it to the sun for several more. Repeat the sequence several times. Finally, after it has been buried in earth and soaked in water, in about 7 or 8 months, it will be covered in verdigris and look ancient and weathered. Everyone at court knew that. Apart from the 3 great tumors, the court also was home to 2 great assets. The first was Chancellor Liu's eyes, and the second was Supervisor Yuan's mouth. When Chancellor Liu's eyes passed this judgment, Qitan was exceptionally upset. One of the other guests immediately called the authorities to take Master Xu to the government bureau and confiscate his goods while they were at it. Liu Tongyi looked on with interest. Master Xu had several large crates of goods, and apart from the boxes, which were real wood, everything else was an imitation. The fake goods were strewn all over the boat by the constables and bailiffs from the government offices. Gold and silver, copper and iron, jade and glass, all of it looked beautiful as it glimmered in the lamplight. Sadly, there was nothing beautiful about the look on my nephew Qitan's face. As I see it, young men must experience some turmoil. They must take some losses in order to mature. Liu Tongyi stood apart, as if the scene had nothing to do with him. He casually picked up an item and toyed with it. I strode over to take a look. It proved to be a mellow little piece of jade with cloud-like crimson swirls against a background of white. It was a lovely stone, sparkling and translucent. I gathered that this was material Master Xu had been keeping to make another fake. There was red in it already. If it was dyed, it could be turned into a bloodstone and carved with a counterfeit seal from the previous dynasty. Following his inspection, Liu Tongyi put it back. The bailiffs were sure to want to take all these fakes back to the government bureau to serve as evidence. Chee-tahn had been deeply wounded by the wine cup. After leaving the pleasure boat, he said he had something to do. Probably going drinking somewhere. In order to not draw too much attention when we arrived, Liu Tongyi and I had shared a carriage from his residence, which now first took me back to my manor. In front of my gates, I got out and thanked Liu Tongyi. "I really have taken you out of your way today, Chancellor Liu." Liu Tongyi also got out and stood smiling next to the carriage. "Your Highness is too kind." In the night breeze, the creases in his jade robe stirred like the rippling waters of a lake. I took something from my sleeve and presented it to him. "I hope you will accept this small token, Chancellor Liu." Liu Tongyi was a little surprised when he saw it. "What I'm doing is called offering stolen flowers to the Buddha," I said. "I hope you will be merciful and not report me to the Court of Judicial Review. I think that it makes no great difference whether this little stone is included among the fake goods." Liu Tongyi's eyes curved slightly. "Your Highness isn't only asking me to play deaf and dumb, but also to accept stolen goods." "You won't accept it?" I asked morosely. The curve of Liu Tongyi's eyes deepened. He took the little stone from my hand and lifted his sleeves. "Thank you, Your Highness. I bid you farewell." I watched him step into his carriage, which then receded into the darkness. Tonight had been worth practically as much to me as the past 10 years of my life. It seemed that Liu Tongyi's usual rigid and fastidious manner wasn't entirely his true self. I had not misjudged him. After all, if he really were a dried-up scholar, how could he have become Imperial Chancellor at such a young age? I walked inside, afloat upon a charming night breeze. Once through the gate, I immediately sensed something amiss. A person standing by my side gate stamped his feet and said, "Oh, Your Highness Prince Huai, you're back at last." When I saw him, I froze. Surely not. This late at night, how could it be? I walked quickly toward the main hall. The state of affairs I observed along the way proved that it really could. I straightened my clothing and stepped into the main hall. I was just about to kneel when from the seat of honor came a familiar voice. "You're finally back, Imperial Uncle. No need to kneel. You don't have to be so proper when you see us in your own home." I bowed. "Greetings, Your Majesty. I was unaware that Your Majesty would be gracing me with your presence and have not prepared an adequate reception. I hope Your Majesty will forgive me." My nephew the Emperor, sitting in the central seat at the head of the room, said impatiently, "Imperial Uncle, why don't you straighten out your tongue and speak to us properly?" I had no choice but to stand up straight and say with a smile, "Your Majesty, what has brought you here so late at night?" This question at last placated the Emperor. He leaned back in his seat and accepted tea from a young eunuch. "This evening, we heard that the family tragedy at your residence had taken a turn for the worse. The princess attempted to hang herself, and the other suspect rammed his head against a wall and bit his tongue. Our mother is unwell and lacks the strength to come and inquire into such a serious matter. There had been no trace of you since you left the palace, Imperial Uncle. So we had no choice but to come in person to your residence to oversee your domestic affairs for you. Do you think we have meddled, Imperial Uncle?" So from the time I went to the palace to the time I came home, the situation at the manor had devolved to such a degree. "It is to my infinite distress that my domestic affairs have disturbed Your Majesty," I said at once. "I am moved to tears of gratitude by the solicitude Your Majesty has shown me." Chee-juh cast down his eyes and used the lid of his teacup to stir the leaves floating in the tea. "Infinitely distressed and moved to tears. Your labors are great, Imperial Uncle. You ought to look after your health. We have heard that this evening you and Chancellor Liu visited a pleasure boat together and listened to music on the river. One wonders whether you were content to leave it at that." When Liu Tongyi and I stood together at the gate, we must have attracted considerable notice from those inside. "Oh yes," I said. "This afternoon, Prince Dai wished to buy an antique. I know little of such things, so I invited Chancellor Liu to come take a look. Yes, Qi-tahn just came to complain to us," said Qizhe. "He says you insisted on inviting Chancellor Liu, and now he owes Liu Tongyi a favor and has lost face in front of him." The hall was vast and half full of people. I had rushed in and only had time for a passing glance, so I hadn't had a clear look at who was there. "Prince Dai did indeed leave a step ahead of me," I said. "He said he was going drinking, so I made do with Chancellor Liu's carriage on the way back. It did not occur to me that Prince Dai would reach my house ahead of me and bring his complaint to Your Majesty. If he comes to me again to borrow money when he has none of his own to spend, I will not lend it to him." I glanced left and right. Where has that brat Prince Dai gone? I have a score to settle with him. I swept the room a number of times and found nothing but guards and eunuchs. I didn't see Qi-tahn. Chee-juh raised his eyelids slightly and put on a tiny smile. "Qi-tahn must have known that we were at Huai Manor and worried that we would become impatient waiting for you. This is why he deliberately hurried here to tell us." As he spoke, his account inadvertently shifted into a complaint. "He might have regretted it himself after the fact and worried that you would chide him when you returned, so he left at once. It was just while you were talking to Chancellor Liu at the gate, Imperial Uncle. He left by the back gate. Don't blame him." I responded, smiling. "With Your Majesty to intercede for him. However much I might have wished to settle accounts, I no longer wish it. Imperial uncle, said Qizhe, we do not know whether we ought to be complimenting you on your magnanimity and composure. Chee-tahn, ignorant of the situation, heard along the way that we had come to your residence and knew that it might be a matter of urgency, so he ran over in a flurry to notify us of your whereabouts. Meanwhile, Imperial uncle, once you had concluded your solicitous attentions to your nephew, you took your sweet time coming back in Chancellor Liu's carriage and even stopped to have a chat. Not only had I had a chat, I had also given a gift. I wondered what kind of precious treasure the little stone I had given Liu Tong-yee had become in the telling when it was reported. This evening I had gone a little overboard, hugging myself in delight over getting a little closer to Ranci, and it happened to coincide with Chee-juh's presence at the manor. This was just my bad luck. My intentions might be ill, but everything I had done was open and above board. I had no need to hide. I looked at Qizhe and said frankly, because the person I had troubled was Chancellor Liu, I needed to be respectful. Chancellor Liu and I are hardly friends. I wanted to say a little more and get to know him better. Qizhe looked into my eyes again and put his teacup back onto the tray held up by the young eunuch. I quickly followed up. I had no idea that your majesty was here, or else I would have come faster than a messenger bearing a military dispatch. Qizhe raised a hand and waved. Enough. If you say anything else, the subject will run 18,000 li away from us. Imperial uncle, an imperial physician has examined the princess. She was not seriously injured and has already regained consciousness. We asked her a few questions, and she had some things to say. From Qizhe's expression, I could tell that the princess's words and deeds had not fallen short of this morning's efforts. Imperial uncle, said Qizhe, what are you planning to do? This is our first time looking into this kind of domestic affair. It will be up to you in the end. I said hesitantly, as it has already disturbed your majesty, reasonably speaking, it ought to be handled by the court of the imperial clan, but I still wish. Qizhe raised his eyebrows. You still wish to resolve it at home? I sighed. Once this storm is past, my reputation, hardly anything will remain of it. If this goes to the court of the imperial clan, most likely nothing will remain. Qizhe leaned against the yellow satin cushion embroidered with a dragon that a eunuch had placed on his chair. How are you planning to punish the princess and Hejong, Imperial uncle? The princess is indeed pregnant, I said, but apart from her own account, there is no evidence that clearly demonstrates a connection to the accountant Hejong. I think I ought to investigate. Furthermore, I believe that while the mother has done wrong, the child is innocent. Fine. That is just, said Qizhe. It is impossible to determine now who the child in the princess's room belongs to. Why not settle the princess in a quiet place and make a decision after she has had the child and it can be determined whether it is of your blood, Imperial uncle? My forehead throbbed, and a heaviness settled into my spine. I had no choice but to say, there is no need to investigate this matter. I am certain that the child in the princess's womb is indeed not mine. The already quiet hall seemed to grow even more hushed when I said this. Qizhe's expression was a little hard to fathom. Shortly, he said, You are already certain then, Imperial uncle. Out of deference to your many years of marriage, if you plead for mercy on the princess's behalf, we will forgive her. But what we do not understand is Hejong. He is only a scholar taken into your residence. Why would the princess say it was him if this were not the truth? And why are you so determined to keep investigating rather than believe the princess? He looked me up and down again. Why not imprison Hejong in the court of the imperial clan's prison? I sighed again. It is my belief that there is much to suspect in the princess's account. I do not wish to tie this matter up carelessly. If her lover is indeed someone else, I cannot bear the thought that he will go wholly unpunished. The corners of Qizhe's lips twitched. You cannot bear it. You make a good point, Imperial uncle. The two beams of his sharp gaze all but cut through my face. Shortly after, Qizhe rose without warning. Imperial uncle, come with us to your rear retiring room. The rest of you need not follow. We wish to say a few words in private to Prince Huai. The rear retiring room was a small room behind the main hall and separated by a side chamber. It was a place to withdraw to and rest on occasions when one grew weary while waiting to receive guests. I liked to go there myself. Once over the threshold, Qizhe looked around and said, "The furnishings in this room have never changed." I stood in the place of lower precedence and smiled obsequiously. "This is on account of my laziness." Qizhe turned his head and gave me a glance. "It's just you and me here. There's no need for so much ceremony. Close the door." I immediately obeyed. Qizhe put his hands behind his back and regarded me. "That Hejong, we saw him as well. He appears gentle and delicate. It's no wonder you feel tenderness toward him, Imperial uncle." All the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. "Your Majesty," I said quickly, "Hejong truly isn't enough. There's no need for concealment," said Qizhe. "How could we be unaware of your predilection?" I earnestly defended myself. "Although I do have a certain fondness, I have nonetheless always been cautious. I would never bring anyone home. I truly did happen to find him downtrodden and pitiful, yet with talent and lofty aspirations. So I gave him a position in my residence so he could keep body and soul together out of a desire to do a good deed. I am not protecting him. It is only that I have reason to suspect the princess has also misunderstood his position, and that is why—" Qizhe frowned slightly. "In Huai manner, if the princess were truly displeased by his presence, she could punish him however she wanted. Why would she need to get knocked up and frame him?" Once again, I sighed helplessly. "My guess is that the princess wanted not only to punish him, but to punish me as well. Your Majesty, the thoughts and actions of women are not always subject to common sense." Qizhe's eyes narrowed and he laughed. "Yes, and you are always more sensible, Imperial uncle. Qili was right. As soon as you open your mouth, all justice is on your side." I bowed my head and said, "I would not dare to presume. I have only ever told the truth." Qizhe took 2 steps, then retraced them and stopped in front of me. "Told the truth? Chengjuan, I have never known which of your statements is true and which is false. For example, you say you prefer men, but when our mother arranged your marriage with the princess and we officiated, you still married her. You have always been romantic, and we have heard that you have a man here, another man there. I've heard many names, all these Scholar Zhangs and Master Lees. Even Yun Yu seems to be included among their ranks." Hearing the final name, I immediately raised my head and said, "That's not—" Qizhe cut me off. "But it seems that no one has ever entered your heart, Imperial uncle. Even Yun Yu won't satisfy you. You have your eye on Liu Tongyi now?" A chill ran up my back. I simply made my voice flat and expressionless and slowly said, "Your Majesty, though I do have such hobbies, I have only indulged them in pleasure houses. I am not in the habit of having stray thoughts about everyone I come across which might taint those relationships. Supervisor Yuan and Chancellor Liu are your Majesty's loyal subjects, pillars of the court. How can they be polluted by me, or by such matters? My own reputation is well known already, and I have nothing more to fear from slander. But if it should damage the honor of loyal subjects, then even if I were to be dismembered, I could not atone for my crime." For a time, the room was silent. When Qizhe spoke again, his tone had softened. "We were only bringing up such rumors as a joke. There's no need to disparage yourself like this or to speak so seriously. You are a pillar of the court, the person we most rely on. If you make yourself out to be worthless, what are we to do?" "I have always muddled along carelessly," I said, "making no contributions to your Majesty or the state. It is your Majesty who has favored me." After another silence, Qizhe said, "Chengjuan, we have been meaning to ask you a question. What is in your heart, after all?" "Nothing but loyalty to your Majesty and the state," I said empathetically. Qizhe looked at me and looked at me again. The corners of his lips twitched slightly as he said, This is why we say that we never know which of your statements we ought to believe. You just said that you muddle along carelessly, making no contributions to us or the state. Yet now you insist that you have nothing but loyalty to us in the state. I smiled. I may be muddled and shiftless, yet still loyal. Loyalty does not necessarily come with ability. Qizhe swept his sleeve and said, "Fine. Very sensible. Now, we will leave the matter of the princess where it is, Imperial Uncle, and you can deliberate on her punishment yourself. The same applies to Hejong. You may take care of your own domestic affairs." I opened the door and waited until Chee-juh had gone out to follow him. My nerves were strained. I felt weary. At 3, you can see what a man will be in his prime. At 7, you can see what he'll be in old age. This common saying isn't accurate at all. Thinking back to when Qizhe was little, how quiet and obedient he was. Who could have imagined how compelling he would be today? No one can guess how a person will change in the future until he changes. The emperor at last made his way back to the palace. I respectfully saw him to the gate. When I went back inside, the ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. I stood outside the door of the room where the princess was being held. I wanted to go in, but I was afraid that the floodgates would open wider if she saw me. So I walked away and circled around to the little room off the rear courtyard where Hejong was being held. When I came up to the corridor, it occurred to me that many of the maids had come with the princess as part of her dowry and were quite loyal to her. Tomorrow, one of them might well go and say to the princess, "Last night His Highness did not go see you, but he went to Hejong's room." The situation might become even more helpless, so I went back. Suddenly, I thought, what if I just don't see either of them? But in all likelihood, Hejong had been falsely accused by the princess. I'd heard he had been working quite industriously since coming to the manor despite earning hardly any money. Now, what with ramming his head against a wall and biting his tongue, he was in an awful state. It would be inhumane not to see him. If I was going to see Hejong, I first had to see the princess. I went to the princess's door. This time, I thought about what would happen if a maid went to the princess tomorrow and said, "After seeing you yesterday, His Highness immediately went to see Hejong." This decision also seemed somewhat dangerous. I wavered indecisively by the princess's door. Next to me, Chief Steward Cao said, "Your Highness has been thinking of the princess, I can tell. To think matters between your Highness and the princess have reached such a stage." He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Yes," I said. "It's said that marriages are the outcome of fortune accumulated in a previous lifetime. But it seems that in our last lifetimes, the princess and I gathered little." I raised a hand and said to Chief Steward Cao, "Open the door." I stepped into the room. The princess was lying on the bed with her face turned to the wall. 4 maids were in attendance by the bed to keep her from attempting suicide again. The maids bowed to me, then discreetly withdrew. Chief Steward Cao also very considerately closed the door behind me. When I looked at the princess, I only wanted to sigh. I didn't know what I could say, but I couldn't say nothing. I deliberated for an age, then said, "I suppose you vented your anger today." The princess scoffed and sat up in bed. "Your Highness won't ask whose child it is?" I was silent, so the princess continued with a sneer. "Your Highness is always putting on all kinds of airs. But now that it comes down to it, it turns out you're a spineless cuckold. I won't tell you who the child's father is, even on pain of death." "Saying this amounts to telling me that your accusation against Hejong is false," I said. The princess looked alarmed. Then, holding her head high, she said, "There's only you and me here. We weren't in the courtroom of the court of the Imperial clan. I could tell you that I'm going to drag down Hejong even if it means my life. And what difference would it make?" "I only want to know for my own satisfaction," I said. "And you say you haven't had impure relations with Hejong. See how anxious you are?" "If you insist on thinking so, there's nothing I can do about it," I said. "But why did you have to do this to yourself?" The princess turned her face away without answering. I turned around. "His Majesty has graciously allowed me to adjudicate this matter myself. I had a part in driving you to these extremes, so I will think of a good outcome for you. When I opened the door, I heard the princess say behind me, Your Highness, I've actually hated you since before I married you, and I still do. I did this because I refused to resign myself to this fate. What have I done to deserve this? Before I left, I said, So you made your fate even worse? With the princess in this state, there really was nothing I could say to her, so I stepped out of the room. Upon leaving, I did go to the cramped room containing Hejong. He was also lying in bed with a few servants in the room to keep an eye on him. Seeing me enter, they bowed and withdrew. Chief Steward Cao once again closed the door behind me. I didn't know whether Hejong was conscious or not. I walked up to his bed. I know that this has nothing to do with you, and the princess has wrongly accused you. You have been subjected to an injustice. I'm very sorry. Hejong's head was wrapped in round upon round of white bandages. He shifted, and 2 tears flowed slowly from the corners of his eyes. I continued, Though I have no proof now, tomorrow I will be sure to give you justice. When I left the little room, Chief Steward Cao said, Your Highness, how can the matter of the princess be investigated? Lock each of the princess's personal maids who came to the manor with her in a separate retiring room, and tell them that if they reveal the identity of the princess's lover, I will only kill that man and not the princess. If they do not reveal him, tomorrow I will send the princess on her way. Steward Cao went to carry out my orders at that, not omitting to add before he left, Your Highness is wise. The next day, the truth emerged. The princess's lover was one of the manor's guards. He had once been a guard in Li Yue's residence. After I was married, Li Yue recommended him to me. I assumed that this man was a spy that the Empress Dowager wished to install in my home, so I accepted him and had him serve as an interior guard. When I went to have this man arrested, he had already run off. After learning of her pregnancy, the princess had begged him to take her far away from the manor, but instead, he had acquired a sachet of drugs and told her to abort the pregnancy. In other words, the princess had in fact been provoked by him, but she didn't want to lay the blame on her lover, so she decided to blame her own fate. Fate had decreed that she and her beloved be born to different stations and deprived of a happy ending. Thus, her hatred settled on me, the one who had subjected her to this fate by marrying her against her will. This reality saddened me. I had previously supposed that the princess might have changed her mind and fallen in love with me. A man like me ought to have had no trouble winning the heart of a young woman. So, I assumed it was only because she was a well-bred lady that she felt uncomfortable broaching the subject. I had never taken the time to notice. So in the end, her love had turned to hate. From her teeth-gnashing loathing of me yesterday and her insistence on saddling Hejong with the blame, it was evident that she was jealous. Without profound love, where could such acrimonious hatred come from? Who could have guessed the truth? Apart from my even greater wonder at the princess's conduct, I couldn't help but feel downcast. But why did she have to get Hejong involved? After hearing the news that the guard had run off, the princess went mad again. It was a different madness from yesterday's. She laughed, she cried, she screamed. Pointing at me, she said, It's all your fault. I planned to break it off with him after I came here. I thought of submitting to you, but you turned out to be a cut sleeve. Why would you marry me if you're a cut sleeve? I hate you. I'll make you wish you were dead. I'll ruin the lives of everyone you care for. So it still circled around to being all my fault. At this point, I had no further interest in arguing with the princess, so I agreed with her. Fine, it's all my fault. You committed adultery with the guard, slandered a bystander, conceived an illegitimate child, and on top of that destroyed my reputation and that of my family line. Though my reputation hardly needed destroying. What punishment do you expect from me? The princess bit her lip and burst into tears. I sighed. Well, I will find you a convent. There, you can abstain from meat and chant the name of the Buddha. Settle your mind and untie the knot in your heart as you wait for the child to be born in peace, I said mercifully. Regardless of anything else, the child has done no wrong. In that moment, I thought that even though I had become a cuckold, I was a cuckold with a halo above my head. In the afternoon, Supervisor Yuan stopped by Huai Manor. He hadn't changed out of his court dress. Sitting in a gazebo in the courtyard, he said with a bright smile, "Your Highness truly is a saintly cuckold, with much too open a heart." I could hardly keep my countenance. "Supervisor Yuan, I have been badly hurt by this abrupt family tragedy. I hope you can be understanding." "It's nothing," said Yuan Yu. "With a couple of pretty young men to console you, your Highness's yurt will be all better by the end of the night." Then, changing the subject, he said, "Oh, yes, I heard that His Majesty paid a personal visit last night." "Yes," I said. I had gone with Prince Dai and Chancellor Liu to see an antique and couldn't receive him in a timely manner. My profound distress has yet to abate. Speaking of which, I've remembered something I was planning to discuss with you, Supervisor Yuan. Last night, His Majesty asked me something concerning my relationship with you." Yuan Yu raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh?" He put his arms on his chair's armrests. His eyes glinted faintly, but his expression remained unchanged, and he said in the same tone as before, "What relationship did the Emperor say your Highness Prince Huai has with me?" "His Majesty suspected that you and I have that kind of relationship. Everyone is aware of this habit of mine. That His Majesty would say so indicates that someone has been taking note. Given that this is a delicate time, why don't you avoid me for the time being, Supervisor Yuan? I'm afraid of dragging down your reputation." Yuan Yu didn't answer. He looked at me, then after a moment, laughed and said, "I don't think there's anything to avoid. My reputation is that of a little treacherous courtier, who is the son of a great treacherous courtier. It is nothing short of your Highness Prince Huai's, but my own temperament. I say, I don't care how delicate the time may be. I'll keep doing as I please. Unless your Highness Prince Huai is worried about being burdened by me and wishes to avoid me, then I will stop coming here." I met his gaze. I could only smile and say, "Your words are always unanswerable, Supervisor Yuan. How could I dare tell you not to come? Since you don't mind, we'll go on as we have been." For once, Yuan Yu didn't add anything. He only stood and looked at some peonies outside the gazebo. Shortly, he turned his head and looked askance at me. "His Majesty wasn't wrong. There is a bit of something between your Highness and myself." When he said this, my teacup shook in my hands. "Supervisor Yuan, I have apologized to you 1,000 times, and now I apologize to you again. I was drunk then and took you for someone else. I hope you will be charitable and let it go. Speaking of that incident, it really was a small mistake I had made during my many years of dalliances. I recall that Qili had invited guests, saying that he had something to show everyone. Chee-tahn had paid a visit to borrow from me that day, so the invitation was delivered to Huai Manor. However, only Qizhe received one. I was not invited. I joked to Qizhe that Chee-lee must have obtained rare items that he couldn't let his Imperial uncle see, then brazenly accompanied my nephew. When we reached Qili's manor, my Imperial nephews were all gathered, along with Yuan Yu, Wang Xuan, and the other young men who usually hung around my nephews. I said to Chee-lee, "What nice things are keeping you from your Imperial uncle?" Chee-lee looked at me without a word, raised his hands, and clapped. In response, a number of golden-haired, blue-eyed, scantily clad beautiful girls undulated into the room and began to twirl their hips and cavort. Their dancing was nothing like the style here in the Midlands, making their breasts bounce as their slitted skirts flew up again and again, exposing their bare thighs. The eyes of my Imperial nephews and the other men were arrested, almost as if they were intoxicated. I couldn't help but sigh. These children had been brought up too strictly. They had too little experience. Qili saw my bleak look and said, "Imperial uncle, I think you know why I didn't invite you." Fortunately, Qifei knew the proper way of showing respect to an elder. He summoned a number of pretty serving boys to pour wine for me. Unfortunately, most of them were still young. I am not particularly interested in the 15 and 16-year-old ones who haven't yet really developed. The ones who suit my taste best are just on the point of maturity or already fully grown. Among the serving boys, there was only one slightly older one who narrowly caught my interest. I took him by the hand and sat with him a while. The swaying of the foreign dancers had made me dizzy, so I simply went to a gazebo in the garden to drink in peace, keeping only the serving boy who had taken my fancy with me. The afternoon was warm, and I was a little drowsy after a few cups of wine, so I took a brief nap in the gazebo. While I was muddled with sleep, I heard someone calling into my ear. "Your Highness Prince Huai! Your Highness Prince Huai!" The voice sank into me and made my heart itch. I thought it was the youth who had been keeping me company, so I gathered up the sleeve beside me, pulled that person into my arms, and kissed him. Not far away, a voice called out, "Oh no, what a disaster! Imperial Uncle has the wrong person." I opened my eyes and realized what a terrible mistake I had made. The person I pulled into my arms was Yunyu. As little subject to embarrassment as I am, my face still grew hot. Fortunately, Yunyu was equal to the situation. He stood, brushed himself off, and said with a smile, "Your Highness was dazed from sleep. What beauty did you take me for?" I got to my feet and hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry. Yunyu said, still smiling, "It's nothing." I came too close. Qili stood outside the gazebo, tapping his palm with the fan. "Next time you draw someone into your arms, Imperial Uncle, remember to open your eyes first." With that blabbermouthed Chee-lee as witness, presumably many had learned of this event and used it as fodder for their private ridicule of me afterward. Recalling that period, even Qizhe had given me strange looks. Probably he had also known, and that was why he said what he said last night. Yunyu said unhurriedly, "On that subject, I ought to say a word of thanks to your Highness for the favor you showed me." I coughed and lifted my teacup to take a drink. Yunyu stood, looking at the flowers, then said, "Your Highness has sent the princess to cultivate her mind in a convent. What of Hujong?" "He has been wrongly accused," I said, "and he must be compensated for it. I asked Qili to find something like an academy where I can send him once he has recovered. It will be advantageous to take this time to add some benevolence to my reputation." Yunyu turned around. "Your Highness Prince Huai acts more and more as if he already occupied that highest seat." My hand froze. I put down my cup. "Do not worry, Your Highness," said Yunyu. "There is no one around." "Supervisor Yun," I said, "some things are best left unsaid." Yunyu smiled. "I hear and obey. But don't you suspect there is more to the princess's behavior? In causing this scandal, it seems as if she was deliberately trying to ruin your reputation, even if she had to give up her life for it. Perhaps she received instructions from some quarter. As for Hujong—" "I am aware," I said. "Still, I will meet all challenges by holding steady." Yunyu said, "It's getting late. I will take my leave." When he walked up to me, he stopped. In a lower voice, he told me, "The evening of the day after tomorrow, at Yuehua Pavilion, do not fail to come due to misgivings about your reputation, Your Highness. My father and Lord Wang asked me particularly to notify you. Also, there is the matter of Liu Tongyi. Your Highness would be wise to keep your distance from him. I am sure some indispensable plan must be motivating Your Highness to approach him, but I think that he is a very different character and worry that Your Highness will end up in a thorny predicament." "Yes, I am aware. I will be careful." Yunyu left then. I sat there, watching his figure retreat into the distance and disappear at the turn of a narrow path. Yunyu, youthful and accomplished, with his high position and great authority. He was all but unparalleled, like a peony in full bloom. At his age, everything about him was already exceptional. Why did he insist on plotting rebellion with his father? Alrighty, everyone. That concludes the reading of Chapter 2 of The Imperial Uncle by Feng Gua Guo. And, this was a pretty interesting chapter. I only have a couple of things to say, not really a lot. But the first thing I wanted to say, because I feel like, man, has it really been an eternity since I did some kind of Mandarin lesson for you all? I think so. But there was something that was said very, very much between Prince Huai and Liu Tongyi, and that was, "You are too kind." So I figured, why not teach you guys how to say "you are too kind"? Yee! So the way that you say it first is "ni." "Ni" is you. "Tai" is to. "Ke-qi." "Ke-qi" is, well, kind. And "le," well, we'll leave that word alone. Anyway, so when you put it all together, "你太客气了." So, 你太客气了. You are too kind, essentially. And, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it on that front. So, moving forward, that's the only Mandarin lesson that I have. I wanted to go to, oh, no, I lied. I wanted to go to page 28 because there was another Mandarin lesson, and that is after Prince Huai gave Chancellor Liu the little stone thingy. And he said, "What I'm doing is called offering stolen flowers to the Buddha." I feel like that was said somewhere in another Danmei I read on my channel. I'm not sure, but that doesn't really matter. I'm going to share how to say it since it's not something that is commonly said in the books that have been read. So the way to say that is 借花献佛. So 借, j, you're going to do the fourth tone down, and then hua, first tone, xian, also going down, and fo is going up. So it's fo, fo. So xianhua, I'm sorry, 借花献佛, offering stolen flowers to the Buddha. And in case it wasn't clear on what that potentially means, what it means is basically using someone else's resources or their ideas to gain favor or credit for yourself. Now, the other thing that I want to say about this princess is, you know, she really is kind of stupid, not even gonna lie. And I'm just taking that back to page 37 when he went to go visit her to, first off, you know, see, quote unquote, if she was okay. But, you know, basically like, hey, you done? You've done a lot today. And, you know, she's like, "I'm not going to tell you who the child is no matter what. You won't even ask. So you are really a homosexual cuckold, a spineless cuckold," which to me, it's like, first off, I don't really think he's spineless. I don't even consider him a cuckold, really. He's still getting his thing on, you know, at pleasure houses. So he's minding his own business and doing what he does. But the thing is, I thought it was funny because when she was like, "I won't tell you who the child's father is, even on pain of death." And he was like, "You know, saying that to me basically lets me know that you lied about Hejong, right?" And then she was like, "Well, either way, there's only you and me here, no one else. So this proves nothing." I was like, "You're an idiot. That's what you are." And so then as we keep going, you know, she's basically just like, you know, "I hated you before and I still hate you now. And I hate this fate. I don't deserve this." And to me, it's like, on one hand, I get being upset with him because he married you and you were unwilling. But it's like, he's not totally at fault. He's partially at fault, but then you also have to look at your parents or your father because they cajoled you, persuaded you, or said whatever they needed to say to convince you. And then there's also you. You are at fault because you agreed. Now, don't get me wrong. I know the time period that we're in and everything, but the point is your parents took the time out to convince you, which means you could have kept denying them. So anyway, everybody is at fault. And at the end of the day, he had done the best he could beforehand and in the earlier stages or whatever, you know, giving you everything that you want, you know, asking you for your consent rather than taking you by force. And it's like nothing could be done to win you over. And you weren't even giving him the chance because of this reputation that you thought he had, which, don't get me wrong, she did say, you know, "I was considering giving you a chance, but then I found out you're gay." And it's just like, okay, whatever you say. At this point, I would just say that maybe he's bi, but I guess that doesn't really matter. And bisexual, I don't know if that probably, who knows if there was a term for that back then. I'm sure there was. But anyway, but he goes on to say to her, like I said, she's really stupid because, she's like, my fate is so awful. I don't deserve this. And then he asks her, so you made your fate even worse? And it's just like, yeah, girl, are you thinking properly? Because now you have a baby in your belly. And you're going to have that baby. And the guy you actually had the baby with ran out. So what? What exactly are you looking to gain from this? But I do appreciate Yunyu, who's like, hey, bud, like, I think there's something deeper. Maybe she received instructions from someone, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And it was like, yeah. Yeah, because it's not that serious. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand being upset with your husband and everything like that, but it's been 5 years. Y'all have not been together. For you to develop such a hatred towards someone who's treating you respectfully, it just sounds kind of odd. Whatever. She's a weird lady. Point is, I don't like the princess. I'm sure no one does. But anyway, that's all I have to say about these chapters. It was literally just one, Kamaria. This chapter. I will see you all again next time. I'm actually thinking about, actually, I'm not going to say that because I'm recording this in advance. So by the time you guys hear it, it'll be the day before. So never mind. Please let me know your thoughts and reactions in the comment section. And well, I'm Neiman.